So I'm here today to talk to you about how fast is your WordPress hosting actually. For those who don't know me, which is pretty much everyone in this room, I'm Quintin Russ, I'm from Auckland, New Zealand, and performance is a topic that is very dear to my heart. I started my career out as a web developer, and I've been hosting WordPress sites for over 20 years now. And the company that I founded back in 2004 was called SiteHost, and one of the brands that we acquired along the way is called MyHost, which we operate here in Australia. And at MyHost we work with web developers on a daily basis, and a lot of them use WordPress as the most popular CMS out there. And our job is to make sure that everything runs smoothly and that our customers get the most out of their hosting experience. Okay, so a show of hands, if you would, because audience participation is always great. Who here would like their WordPress site to be faster? And keep them up, please. All right, now keep your hands up if you don't know the most impactful change that you could make to make it faster today. And then finally, please keep your hands up if you don't know how fast your hosting actually is right now. Yeah. So this is the problem, thank you. This is the problem that I'm here to talk about today. And for everybody else in the room, this might be a helpful diagnostic tool for you if you're ever asked to diagnose a slow WordPress site for your friends and family. Now, building websites is hard, complex work. And one of the things that hard-working developers put effort into is getting their websites running fast. And for good reason, because the faster your website runs, the better, right? From a UX perspective, slow websites have high bounce rates and less satisfied users. And from an SEO perspective, high bounce rates are detected by Google, and there's a direct cost as well, which we'll look to on the next slide. And ultimately, better search results and lower bounce rates mean more users, more customers, more conversion. And none of this is new, of course. It's been almost 20 years since Amazon famously discovered that 1/10 of a second, 100 milliseconds, cost 1% in revenue. But how do you know if your hosting is actually fast? Today, differentiating hosting on raw performance is not easy, which is why we've built the WordPress plugin, PHP Vitals. And PHP Vitals is a plugin that gives you a simple answer to your performance question. And I've got a live demo later on just showing how easy it is to install and compare. Now, some of you might be wondering what PHP has to do with WordPress performance, or how PHP and SEO are connected. And I can answer that, but be warned, we're allowed to get a little bit nerdy. Now, most of you will be aware of Google's Core Web Vitals, hopefully, which are an objective measurement of your site's speed. Now, those measurements feed directly into your SEO performance. LCP, or largest content, it's got painful here, but it's painful, measures how quickly the largest block of content loads on a page. And it's a core web vital, and you can measure it using tools like Google PageSpeed Insights. And when you measure LCP, time to first byte is a big contributor. Or the time that it takes for the data to start arriving back after a web request is sent to your server. Because that's literally part of LCP, it's not a standalone core web vital, but it's important enough that Google has a specific set of requirements for how long time to first byte should take. And if you hit the outer limit of Google's good timings, that's where time to first byte takes over 30% of LCP. I'll get through the nerdy part and move on in just a moment. But if we break down LCP, time to first byte is the first thing you wait for. And in this diagram, it's the blue bar. Time to first byte, or TTFB, is unavoidably about server speed. That means time to first byte is largely down to PHP performance. And apologies for my croaky voice. For whatever reason, I've got what's been going around, and it started hitting me about the time we were pushing back from Auckland on Friday afternoon. All right. The faster PHP generates your page, the faster time to first byte is going to be. And the faster time to first byte gives you and a faster time to first byte will give you a faster LCP, which gives you better overall core web vitals, which improves your SEO. And that's all I'm going to say about SEO, except to say that performance matters. Now, on a lot of hosting these days, we have caching involved. Now, can caching solve all of your performance problems? The short answer is no. When you work on page speed and website performance, it's definitely good to include caching. WordPress has a lot of caching plugins to choose from, and in our experience, the WP Super Cache plugin has worked very, very well. Where it works, that is. There's an old joke about how there are only two hard problems in computer science. The first one is naming things, and the second is cache invalidation. And that's got to be true, because when we first submitted this talk, we weren't even calling this plugin PHP Vitals. We changed its name a week after we got accepted. The second hard problem, obviously, is cache invalidation, and there's a reason why caching is a plugin rather than a default WordPress feature. It gets really, really complicated. And even the best plugins can't work everywhere. WP Super Cache won't do anything for WooCommerce, shopping carts, for example, or the admin area. Also, caching can't speed up page rendering after a cache invalidation event, like when a user updates a page or posts a comment. Now, interactions like shopping and commenting are some of the most important things that happen on your site, so it's not an ideal time for everything to slow down. And this is why I'm focusing on PHP performance today, because when caching can't help, the PHP performance of your hosting really matters. And as well as not being able to solve everything, there's also the fact that the caching can cost money. These are annual USD prices for WP Rocket and W3 Total Cache, for example. If you're willing to pay for performance, should you spend hundreds of dollars on caching, or would faster hosting cost less? This calculation isn't easy to make today, partly because hosting performance is hard to evaluate from the outside. So before we look at how PHP Vitals will make comparing WordPress hosting performance easier, here's a look at why it's typically hard to see what's going on. You can think of hosting or your hosting infrastructure as an iceberg, and there's a lot of details hidden under the surface. You can see, obviously as a customer, you can see and control WordPress, and you probably have a degree of control over PHP, like being able to upgrade or select versions. But what's further down? What's underneath the surface? Web hosts look after a lot of complex infrastructure. I know sometimes it feels like all they do is sit back and take your money, but I promise you, there's a little bit more going on, like beers on a Friday afternoon. PHP obviously writes to a database, typically MariaDB or MySQL, and runs on a web server, usually Apache or Nginx or Lightspeed. And under those things, you have an operating system, which is almost always Linux or a flavor of Linux. And at the very bottom, you get to the actual metal, the hardware that this tech stack runs on. And I haven't even mentioned virtualization in there. There's a lot of different layers going on. And reading the initials from Linux all the way up to PHP gets you what's colloquially known as the LAMP stack. It's the foundation for most WordPress sites, and it's entirely up to your web hosting provider to run it well on your behalf. Each layer needs to be monitored, patched, kept secure, and up to date. Now, at every layer, PHP can be slowed down, or it can be sped up. So your choice of host and your choice of plan determines the PHP performance. But how do you see what you're going to get? And this is the transparency problem that has brought us to build PHP Vitals. Hardware is not all created equally. To take a single example, and there are lots, NVMe drives have about 10% of the latency of SSDs. That is, NVMe drives are 10 times faster than SSDs. And whether you get one or the other matters for speed today. But WP Engine, for example, simply sells storage. Are you signing up for modern NVMe storage or something slower? You don't know, and that's the lack of transparency we find today. Now, WP Engine have had their fair share of press this year, so I'll cut them some slack. This conversation is complicated, and no one wants extra confusing jargon thrown in their face. We simply want to know how fast the hosting will run. With a standard metric like GB or gigabyte, you know how much storage you're getting. But today, the other hardware components are impossible to determine. Web hosting plans will never say what CPU or processor is inside your server, for example. And fair enough too, it's just too complicated. But my hope is that with time and feedback, projects like PHP Vitals can be a way to approximate the performance of your hosting plan and have that knowledge up front before you sign up. So you've heard me talk a little bit about CPU performance. Why does CPU performance of your website matter so much? The reality is that CPU cores are far from equal. One very handy rule of thumb is that a newer CPU is much, much faster. And in particular, since 2020, a couple of years have made a huge difference. Now this makes intuitive sense. If you were out shopping for a brand new phone tomorrow, you're not going to be looking for a 6-year-old model. And if you see an iPhone 11 on the shop shelf, you would at least know what you're looking at. But if you're shopping for WordPress hosting tomorrow, you just don't know what hardware you're getting. And that doesn't quite sit right. The graph here shows the CPU marks from a third-party benchmarking service called Passmark Software. They measure the performance of various processors that I personally have invested in from 2007 to 2024. Every CPU on this graph represents a piece of hardware that was worth spending money on for WordPress hosting. And in 2020, a CPU mark of 10,000 would have been great. In 2021, 30,000 was good. Marks of 50 to 60,000 are the standard now. That's a 6-fold increase in just the last 5 years. But a number of web hosts are still running on older, slower CPUs for standard hosting. Even AWS is still selling EC2 instances, which are effectively VPSs, with CPU chips from 2019. That's the iPhone 11 of CPU chips. And this is common practice. Again though, transparency today is lacking. When you compare hosting plans, you just don't know what CPUs you're looking at. You only really know a brand name. Now you might be looking at the last bar on this graph and thinking, it looks a bit short. This actually illustrates my next point, which comes with another warning that we're about to re-enter nerd territory. Maybe we never left. The CPU marks here are a broad representation of CPU performance. They average out a lot of different tests, and most importantly, they take into account the combined work done across multiple cores. So if we dig into the results on the bottom CPU on the graph, which was the 9900X, they look like this. The headline number is 54,717. Which is not an advance over a score we got on hardware in 2022. And so the usual story of newer is better doesn't fit here. But as hosts who love PHP, we like what we see here. And what is more important is the second big number, the single-threaded rating of 4676. Now, single-threaded performance, hands up who knows the difference between multi-threaded and single-threaded performance? A handful of you, okay. So single-thread, I'll blitz through this, but single-threaded performance is about doing a queue of jobs sequentially, one after the other. It's like if you went into a supermarket and there was only one checkout open. Multi-threaded performance does tasks in parallel, like if every checkout was open. And that explains why those numbers are different. Now, PHP requires single-threaded processing. Each request is a single checkout. And when we look at the ranks, we see that this is the 156th best multi-threaded CPU on record, which is not great, but it's the 25th best single-threaded performance. So it's almost as if the CPU is perfect or a specialist in processing PHP requests. Great value for money and very, very good performance. Now, a lot of hosts, and especially hyperscalers like AWS, Azure, GCP, they prioritize density. So what that means is they prioritize multi-threaded performance and the number of cores in a server. So if you're hosting WordPress on a platform that's with them, you're with a provider that doesn't necessarily share your priorities. They'll still take your money though. But for your hosting company, this nerdy stuff is really important to understand deeply. And hopefully that all made sense. But basically you have the option of digging into the CPU marks and whether or not it's optimized for multi-threaded or single-threaded distinctions, talking to your host about what hardware they're running, or, yeah, okay, I lost you guys. It's complicated. So, sorry. Just dying a little bit here. It's complicated, which is why we built PHP Vitals. Okay. Okay. So we're keen to hear your feedback from use cases where people have found apologies. We're keen to hear your feedback from use cases where people have found PHP Vitals useful. Another example that comes to mind is, even if your hosting provider does assure you that you have super quick hardware, your site still might not be as fast as it could be. Now, the reason for this is that you can't control or see the number of websites that sit on the same hardware as yours. And that's down to your provider. And this can change over time. Shared hosting obviously brings down the costs and give you access to a number of things that you'd never get otherwise. But it is sharing. And over-provisioning a hardware is like too many cars on one road. Too many websites on one server can slow everyone down. And your hosting provider's accountant will be happy, but you might not be. The other thing we haven't mentioned is rate limiting is another common practice that restricts your access to the resources of the server. So you might have access to the latest hardware, but for a number of reasons they might put limits on, which can also affect the performance that you're getting. And of course, misconfiguration. No one shows up to work to make mistakes, but sometimes mistakes happen that cause poor performance. Security patches can be applied, for example, and overnight you could notice a significant drop in performance. For these reasons, even if you do know what hardware you're getting from your hosting provider, you still don't know what performance you're going to get. So getting a baseline measurement of your performance from PHP Vitals on a good day, and then comparing it when you have reports from your users of a slowdown, can help your conversation with your host about where the issue might be. Was it a WordPress plugin update or a server software security update? With PHP Vitals, you're more informed. Okay, we're almost there. Now, some WordPress hosting providers are selling additional support to help with performance issues. Fair enough, I say. Performance support can be really time-consuming. But how much value can you get from support if you're on slow hardware? What if instead you spent this $40 a month, in this example, nearly $500 a year, on a faster hosting plan? Might that help more? Would you want to know if the hosting plan you're on was actually fast first? Again, with PHP Vitals, we want to help answer these kind of questions before you get upsold. Okay, so PHP Vitals is our answer to these problems. It's a brand new WordPress plugin that tells you exactly how fast your server runs PHP. How new? Well, PHP Vitals has only been on the plugin directory for about 3 days. Is Luke in the room? Thank you, Luke. Luke was a legend. He got us over the line. Thank you for getting it approved. Today, we're looking for early users. We're looking for feedback, and we're looking for ideas on how we can make this plugin as useful as possible. I am sure a number of you will have use cases and situations we haven't even thought of yet. So, you know, I'm contagious, but obviously come and have a chat. We'll do it outdoors. No, but jokes aside, come have a chat. I'm here for the conversations. And we're really interested in how we can make this better, even dialing in the different metrics that we're storing. Sorry. The big idea here is by making it simple to test and benchmark, we can make WordPress hosting performance more transparent and comparable. For WordPress users like you, that means more data when you're troubleshooting performance issues or choosing a web host. And there's an upside for web hosts as well, because test data is useful for us too. There's always more to learn about your infrastructure, and sometimes when a customer raises an issue, we can use this as a tool to show that actually the issue's in their WordPress install, or help us zoom in and get a better idea of what we can change and improve for all of our customers. So it's good. PHP Vitals can point hosts and companies, including ourselves, in new directions and solve and raise the bar for everyone. And it can help save you time in drilling into performance problems. So what is PHP Vitals exactly? Okay, so today, and again, it's only 3 days old, it's made up of dozens of PHP tests performed live on your server. It takes about maybe a couple of minutes to run a full benchmark, and then it will output granular results, which you can see there in the table, and a simple grade A through F. And on phpvitals.com, we also have a leaderboard for easy comparison, but submitting results is optional. And rather than talk about it, I can just show you. Okay, so I have 3 WordPress installs here, and they're all working. That one's quite slow actually. And so I can come in here. I've installed it already, but and I can kick these off. Did anybody have any questions while these are running? Yes. At the moment, no, but that's a good. This is great feedback. This is what we're happy to hear. Yeah, like a nightly or a weekly thing, or a specific time. Like what's important. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, yeah. No, that's a good point. That's a good point. Okay, so this one's completed. This one got a C. This one's still going. And so is that one. Yeah, were there any other questions? Oh, sorry, down the back. The benchmark. Yeah. So I think in our haste to get this shipped, the benchmark history is not working, but the plan is to have it right there. Oh, was it? The screenshot, it was working, but I don't, yeah, no. When I loaded these up this morning, so James, my colleague, has been working on changes. It's not saving them there, but the answer is yes. The plan is that you will have them there as a history with notes. The date wouldn't be enough? Yeah, okay. Mm. This is before. Yeah. So to cover off the other part of your question, which was around GT metrics. Okay. Yeah, okay, yeah. Yes, I think we definitely want to have the history there. The notes is something I hadn't considered, so thank you. Yeah. Anything else? Was there? Oh, one down here. Optimize for single-threaded performance. Yep. Yes. Anywhere there's PHP and MySQL, you want single-threaded performance. Sorry, just here and then there. Yep. That's good.
What notice? Oh, what would?
Oh. This is open source. We sell hosting. So our business model for this is customers come to us who might be coming from a competitor and say, how fast is your hosting? And we go, fast. It's a little bit like going to the supermarket and asking what meat are in those sausages. And we say meat, you know. So it helps the conversation. It'll save us time. We might do an initial look at a website and we'll get the WordPress credentials as part of a migration. We could install this plugin and tell them what the score is and then tell them what the score would be on ours. So that helps. Equally, we get customers who come to us and say, my website's running slow. My developer says it's your fault. So being able to turn around to them and say, okay, it's not the hardware. And there's lots of different layers that we have to look at the moment to get that answer. So being able to turn around to them and say, no, we've literally benchmarked it with this tool, which has obviously had feedback from from our peers, and we've made it better and better, and it's showing that everything's running sweet. That will save our support team countless hours every week. So those two things alone make sense. And then obviously there's plenty more. So there was, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Email or something like that. Awesome. Okay. And we're getting lots of questions. They are on different servers, yeah. And we've got a little bit of a mystery shopper review in a minute as well. One last one here. I don't know. Not sure. Okay, so this one's actually Ventra IP. This is a C. Of course, this one's on our hardware. It was an A earlier. And this one's on Crazy Domains. And that was an E earlier. All right. So these weren't, these three I cherry picked for just showing you how it works, but we've gone through and been fairly fair in how we've gone about what how we're talking about it today. Okay. So are we back? All right. So I managed to navigate that okay. Okay, so the test scores are based on time spent and they're objective based on a whole bunch of different operations that PHP does. The grades are all relative and they're designed to make it easy to rank test results. Now, some of you will love poring over the test-by-test details, but the grades are there so you don't have to count the milliseconds by yourself. But other comparison methods like customer reviews or ratings just simply do not or cannot describe the performance objectively. You don't know what you're going to get when you sign up for a host, and when you're looking for the cause of poor performance, PHP Vitals will be able to tell you how your hosting is stacking up. Now, grading's an art, and we are definitely still learning. In pre-release testing, for example, we changed it just like 5 days ago. And our initial set of testing surfaced a lot of Ds and Es, which made comparing the hosts too hard. Wherever these thresholds end up exactly, the idea behind the grading system will hopefully stay the same. And the letters are there to make it more transparent and make your life easier. But if you have any ideas about how we can do that for you, I'd love to have a chat. So come and see me out later today. I think we will need to change this in the future though, because with newer hardware or newer PHP releases, what are we going to end up with? A+++? And equally, I think one nice feature will be able to give someone an idea of where their performance ranks today versus where it ranked 3 months ago or on older hardware. And of course, as we get more results coming in from around the world, we'll have more data which we can use to inform how we might come up with a more fair grading system. But it is a fact that today's modern fast hardware will one day be below average. And because of that, test results that earn an A today will one day only be worthy of a D. So take all of these grades with a pinch of salt. We are very, very much still working this one out. Okay, so as previously mentioned, our goal for PHP Vitals and the leaderboard in particular is for you to be able to assess the relationship between price and PHP performance. You might not need an A-grade host, but you do want to make sure you get value for money, whatever you spend. And I think it should be just as easy to compare the performance of $10 plans as it is to find the most gold-plated offering out there. But is this something that people would be interested in? I don't know. I'd be interested to hear more feedback, so come see me later on. Just to expand on that, one of the ideas that we are toying with is maybe we get you to submit anonymously how much am I paying for this hosting plan, and then we aggregate that data, and so we can see, okay, this plan is roughly this amount, or this is what you sort of get for your money in this region or with this provider. But open to hearing thoughts on how we might achieve that, or what some of the issues might be with that. Today, I think PHP Vitals fills an important information gap when it comes to comparing WordPress hosts. It's fast and easy to get PHP performance data from any WordPress host now. And by making hosting more transparent, by showing you who provides fast PHP hosting and who does not, we give you a better idea before or very shortly after you sign up for hosting with those providers. And that's a good sign. So for a bit of fun, as I mentioned earlier, we did a bit of mystery shopping, and we also wanted to make sure we were testing PHP Vitals on a wide variety of hosts before we came and talked to you today. So we set up the plugin on a few common WordPress hosts, mostly going with their mid-range or recommended hosting packages off their websites. And with a bit of estimating to put everything into Aussie dollars, here's what we've seen. Now, of course, these packages differ in terms of overall size, or whether or not management's included, or what support comes with it. So take all of this with a pinch of salt. But what is interesting is in our tests, say Bluehost to WP Engine, looks like a zero gain in terms of performance move. Now, performance is only one part of the equation. I don't want to be here shilling any particular company or ripping on anyone. I'm just here talking about the performance. Other parts of their offering might be worth it. But wouldn't you want to know that these differently priced options are not particularly different on a raw performance basis? Perhaps they are on throughput or scaling, which are completely other benchmark metrics to look at. And those are conversations for another day, of course. Now, we also ran the same test websites through speedvitals.com. which despite the similar name is not affiliated with PHP Vitals at all. Now, Speed Vitals uses Google's Lighthouse to assess performance, with Sydney selected as the location. And here we've graphed out time to first byte and the largest content paintful results for each site. Now, lower times are better, so the best performers are in the bottom left corner. And as you can see, PHP Vitals grades largely follow the pattern you'd expect. The better grades on the quickest sites. The relationship isn't perfect, but that's not exactly surprising considering PHP Vitals isolates the PHP performance, whereas time to first byte and LCP can also be influenced by network latency and whether or not you're running a CDN, for example. But even so, there's a very clear trend emerging from a very small sample size. I didn't have enough time to dig into the outliers entirely, but I'd say that B grade up there near the E's is most likely due to network latency. As I mentioned, this was run from Sydney, so if it was on the other side of the world, that would definitely impact it. So that's PHP Vitals. Install it, give it a whirl, let us know what you think. We'd love to hear your feedback. What do you want it to do? We think it's pretty valuable right now, but there's so much more that we could do with it. For now though, if it makes hosting more transparent, and it makes it easier to troubleshoot performance problems or avoid the race to the bottom, then that's a great start. Thank you for coming to my talk today and giving me the chance to speak to you, even with a croaky voice. We got to the end. You can find out more about us at my-host.au. We have servers in Australia and they rank pretty well on PHP Vitals. A quick search for my host should do the trick, or alternatively, come see me afterwards. Got some cards up here that you can grab. I also have some other swag that I can't take home. And obviously for PHP Vitals, simply go to phpvitals.com or in the web directory, search for PHP Vitals and give it a go. Any questions?
I'm just wondering if you've seen this behavior or you've experienced it. A website loads very, very slow on the first load and it's quicker on the second load.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Is that a time to first byte issue?
Well, that might be a whole host of things, but it could be caching. It could be op cache being primed. There's a number of things that could be playing in there. Maybe run up PHP Vitals and see how fast the hosting is first.
I'll ask an obvious question. What's a supermarket checkout?
Supermarket checkout? What do you guys call it here?
Oh, no.
Oh, you just do it yourself now, don't you? You know? No, it's okay.
The hosting results you had up there before, was that shared or dedicated?
These were all shared. They were shared. Yeah, we didn't go with virtual servers or anything like that. When I spoke to the team who helped me put this together, I said, oh, why don't we put like Linode or AWS or something in there? But we couldn't because we're just going after, we wanted it to be objective and the same kind of offering. We could do that for another blog post or something. Any other, down the back, sir?
How often can you actually run your scan? How many, like, per minute? Like once a minute?
I mean, you can, but it takes a couple, it just depends what rate limits you're running into on that hosting provider. I mean, it's ticking away there. So I don't know, if they have like an overall amount of CPU rate limit on you, you know, give it a whirl, just see what happens. If you run into it, let me know. That might be something that we need to, you know, put a guardrail on so people don't exhaust their hosting plan CPU. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Some of the host providers mentioned like PHP workers. It's usually like a process. So you have like an instance on that or like a multi-threading environment.
So PHP workers is about concurrency. It's about how many checkouts you have open or how many lanes on a motorway. So PHP is still single-threaded. Each one of those workers at any given time is only going to handle one request. Now, a request can be really quick. If your web page returns in 200 milliseconds, that worker is only doing that for 200 milliseconds. But if you have, let's say you have 5 workers and you have 10 requests coming in, 5 of those requests will be waiting, queuing up in those checkouts to go through. That's really what that is. It doesn't say whether or not the person doing the checkout is having a chat to their mate, or can't get something to scan, or are running quickly. Like some people just smash through it. There's competitions for it, right? And then other ones are a bit slow. That's that single-threaded performance difference. Yes, sir.
This is like independent of WordPress, right? PHP Vitals. If you install WooCommerce, your PHP Vitals score isn't going to change.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you spoken to Kevin Ohashi, runs Review Signal and WP Hosting Benchmark.com with you?
I haven't. Yeah, no. I'm happy to have an intro. Haven't really. We largely worked on this out of a need for a bit more visibility for ourselves, even. But no, we haven't really spoken to anybody about it. So happy to have those conversations. Happy to hear more from the community on, like, maybe there was a previous plugin that wasn't maintained that did some really good things, or maybe we've seen one thing that was like amazing and we could bring that in. Like, obviously there's a bit of work involved in these things, but the better we can make it, the more information we can get about, like, what's working well and what's not in the hosting stack.
In terms of troubleshooting, so say you get a bad score, how do you actually go about determining where in the stack the issues lie?
If you get a bad score, you could try setting it up on a different host and seeing if the problem goes away. And then if it does, then you could go to the host that has the bad score and say, I've installed this plugin. Here's the website. Can you tell me whether or not I can get a better score? And then if there's helpful details that we need to provide to make that easier for them to troubleshoot into where the problem might be, then that's feedback that we might provide as well, as like, here's a breakdown, or here's some diagnostics within it that would be useful for, is it NVMe storage over SSD? Like one of these, right. So down here we've got like file and memory options, right? So you might have hardware that's quite quick in some of these things, but it's not so quick at file operations because of the storage. Or, depending on what virtualization stack you're using, the memory bandwidth that you get, memory throughput that you get might be low, and that might bring your score down. There's a lot of detail that we could probably start getting into there, but we were literally working to get this up to the start line, so we haven't even really thought that far. Literally, I was on holiday when my Max, who does marketing for us, said, I'm going to submit to Brisbane WordCamp. What do you think we should do? And I just said, there's this plugin I've been thinking we should write. And then when it got accepted, we went, right, let's write this plugin. So that's how far we've got with this conversation. Sorry, there was one more here and then one more at the back, and then I think the rest probably just come and see me after. Yes, sir.
With the plugin, we be able to identify what you service?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So this is why we built this, the way we built it. Because there's so many different ways that you can obfuscate that. I can fake a CPU to you with virtualization today. I can tell you you're on this, and you're not. I can give you that hardware, but I can rate limit you. So even if you think you're getting that, you're not. I can set up a hosting account and then put 500 other websites on the same server. So even though you might be getting those specs, they're busy. There's the worker example that I gave earlier. The checkouts are crammed. So in order for you to realize whether or not you're getting good performance, you could set up hosting on day one and it's great. And then the accountants decide that they want to put 200 more accounts on that server. And now it's a bit under pressure. Sorry, there was one last question up the back.
It kind of goes off the previous one and follow on from what just has been said. Is there a way that you can determine if you're being rate limited? Because you might be getting that score because you're fixing it too quick.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I think there probably are some things that you could approximate if you can tell what, like if you could get a baseline off a bunch of hosts and then see, this for this particular model of hardware, this is what we normally see, and then we're actually seeing it's below. So maybe you don't see that it's being rate limited, but you could say on a percentile basis where that hardware is sitting, if we can determine the hardware.
And we're running this test while the site's being hit in so many different ways from traffic that is requiring those individual workers.
Yeah.
That you could be hitting the rate limit, and then you're going to be running this test and getting a really poor score when it's actually not the true effect.
But, yes, and so
Do this in a staging environment, but again, if that's on your account, same server.
no, it's good feedback. And so maybe what we have to do for that is to split it up and run it through WCLI or WP cron and just do little bits at a time and see what the scores are. Yeah, rather than a big bit. Yeah, I mean, just for what it's worth, it's gone away. These requests are only taking like 16 seconds, 10 seconds on modern hardware. So some WordPress sites are taking more than 10 seconds to load. I'm not saying they're good WordPress sites, but they are. So
then what you could do is, instead of it just being run the test, you could say run an intensive test because you know that your server's good, or spread this test out, do a care test, which will then spread those individual ones over a period of 5-10 minutes.
yeah, no, that's a good suggestion. And if that's feedback that comes back as like we're running into like a Cloud Linux issue or a rate limit or something, then absolutely that's what we want to hear. We're on day 4, so if after I mean, Jeff Bezos talks about being past day 1, but if we end up in 2 weeks' time seeing that, these are configurations, we'll adapt it. Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of validity to that idea. Okay, thank you everyone.